I'm Lexi, and this is what you should know. I think my favourite thing about Halloween in Australia is that I fought tooth and nail for it as a teenager, for it to be celebrated, to then only be hit back with the uneducated attempt at a clapback of, "We're not American." As if somehow this entire holiday was created by Americans and their candy companies, and not an actually old as hell religious holiday that spans across the globe. But for it to now be celebrated, and those who tried to stamp it out of me now in boring costumes trick or treating with their absolutely adorable children, in full costume. Trick or treat indeed, Jessica. Your kids are just so darling. Now smile big and take the damn candy. Am I salty? Maybe just a little bit, but mostly excited for my future children that will be able to celebrate it in all its glory without being called a freak. But before I go too far ahead of myself here, please jump onto Twitter and cast your vote for the Halloween movie to be reviewed. You can do so at WhiskaPod. That is WYSKAPOD. But that's enough of me monologuing, as I am sure you are all excited to hear spooky ghost stories. So, on that note, this is what you should know about the Aradale Lunatic Asylum. Located in Victoria, the asylum was designed by G.W. Vivian and John Clark. The initial design was also adapted for similar buildings in Kew and Beechworth. Building for all three asylums commenced roughly at the same time. However, Ararat was completed first. The asylum was built as a small township within a town, with its own market and gardens, orchards, vineyards, piggeries, and other stock kept on the ground. At the height of its existence, it had over 500 staff, and as it stands today, this complex is made up of 63 buildings varying in age, from the original wings built in the 1860s, all the way to the modern forensic unit, which was built in 1991, which then sadly closed in 1993. Despite no longer being open as an asylum, the facility continued to house female prisoners during the renovation of the Dame Phyllis Frost Centre, right up until its current management took over in 2001. It was then that the Victorian government provided $7.4 million to Melbourne Polytechnic to establish a campus of the Melbourne Polytechnic's Ararat Training Centre on the site of the hospital. With this request, 30 hectares of vineyards and 10 hectares of olive grove were planted in 2002, and an olive processing facility and winery were later built on site. This site also established a 250-ton winery, a 4-hectare lavender farm, and extensive training facilities, and is considered now to be a world-class wine and hospitality training facility. But you're not here for the bright future of the hospital that the Victorian government carved out. No. You're here for the dark and gritty. For the 13,000 deaths in its 130-year history as an asylum. But you'll be happy to know its bright future does mean you can visit the site yourself and indulge in ghost tours. The patients brought to Aradale were deemed either too sick or too dangerous to remain in society. However, it also became a place for those suffering from mental illness, postnatal depression, and conditions such as epilepsy, autism, or Down syndrome. These poor souls were subjected to grueling treatments, including restraint and electroshock therapy. And that isn't including the abuse that they would have suffered at the hands of those who were charged with taking care of patients. And to add to the despair that this place is soaked in, during December of 1886, the old jail at Ararat was proclaimed as J Ward of the Ararat Asylum. This was done to cater to those who were detained in any jail, reformatory, or any other place of confinement who appeared to be insane. A new institution would be built at Sunbury for the retention of the criminally insane. However, when the building was nearing completion, it was decided that it would house females only, and males would remain at J Ward. And in 1988, the Minister of Health announced that J Ward was to be closed over the next year. Speaking of J Ward, there was some interesting people housed there, such as Bill Wallace, a suspected murderer who spent 57 years at J Ward and 7 years at Aradale. Although never tried or convicted for allegedly murdering a friend following an argument over a cigarette, Wallace was declared insane by 2 doctors in 1925 and was held at the governor's pleasure for the next 64 years. He died in Aradale in 1989, aged 107. I feel at the least that would show that those being held at Aradale were being taken care of on a health level, because 107 is not an easy age to reach. Other more notable inmates of the asylum include Charles Fossard, who was admitted in 1903 at age 21 and died in custody in 1974 at aged 92. He was the longest serving patient at the facility, as well as the longest serving prisoner in the entire world, serving nearly 71 years. And the infamous Australian gang member turned author Mark Chopper Reed, who was transferred from Pentridge Prison in late 1978 after arranging for a fellow inmate to cut off both of his ears. Reed only remained in J Ward for a few months before being referred back to Pentridge. And those are without mentioning the executions that took place. Andrew Vere in 1870, Robert Francis Burns in 1883, and Henry Morgan in 1884, all of which were executed for their crimes, which in a brief summary was murder. But what about ghosts? Well, before we get too far ahead of ourselves, let's look at what kind of hauntings there are and what they mean. Let's start with residual haunting activity. This sort of haunting takes place when something traumatic or stressful occurs, and in a place like the Aradale Asylum, being tortured or assaulted as the inmates would have been, this is likely to be the most popular type. Negative energy is literally blasted into the atmosphere, causing it to imprint or record the events. And if you are struggling to understand, think of it like recording a video. It will play the events over and over again. The entities involved in this residual haunting activity are unaware of the surroundings and the change around them, which is why you'll hear of ghosts that appear to walk through walls, whereas if you look up the old blueprints of where it is happening, there was likely once a door there. Next we have intelligent or interactive haunting. There is a little more theory to an intelligent haunting than a residual, and it requires a little bit more of an open mind. Consider the soul for a moment. When our mortal form dies, the soul leaves our body, and we lose about 6 ounces on the instance of death. What is this 6 ounces? Perhaps it is energy leaving our body, our soul. This energy is carrying information of what we used to be. If it can do this, then why couldn't it also carry our intelligence? If it can carry our former intelligence of our previous life, then it should be able to interact with us intelligently. When we see this soul, we call it a ghost. If this ghost is able to interact with us, is aware of us, can touch us and communicate with us, then it is intelligent or an interactive haunting. Next we have shadow people or shadow creatures. This is a type of haunting activity that has no real explanation, not that I've been able to find, at least anyway. Just that they are a different form of ghost. They are usually shapeless, dark masses, mostly seen within your peripheral vision. They are known to do things that are different from ghosts. They can move between walls where there was never a door. They have no human features and don't wear clothes, except for the Hat Man, or hooded figure shadow creatures, which is a whole other phenomena on its own. Those who encounter them tend to report feeling a deep sense of dread, and clairvoyants that encounter shadow people say they do not feel as though they are human. Next we have poltergeist activity. While one of the rarest types of haunting, it is also the scariest, where furniture is moved and sometimes thrown by unseen forces that also interfere with electronics and slam doors. When this isn't attached to just one highly stressed individual, it usually occurs when spirits appear to pull their energy together in order to become strong enough to move larger objects and make more noises. This can typically be solved by finding the root of their anger so that they can pass over and leave you in peace. In most poltergeist cases, they will disappear without any warning, just as they appeared. And in a place such as Aradale Asylum, there is a laundry list for the ghosts of the victims to be furious. And then we have demonic haunting. This is the most dangerous and honestly quite terrifying types of haunting. These creatures are strong, and unlike human spirits, they don't mind showing it. There have been cases where people have been thrown through the air and even attacked. Apparently, their main goal is to break down a person's free will in order to make way for possession. And how long that can take can go anywhere from minutes all the way out to years, and time is no concern for them. This then will lead us to possession types. You have manifestation, which is more of the haunted house type. Footsteps, voices, apparitions, furniture or other objects moving without human agency, odors with no discernible source. Oppression, where there are physical attacks, sleep disturbances including regular nightmares, frequent and severe illness, major depression or anxiety, severe financial or unemployment problems, and relationship troubles. While these things happen in normal course of life, all of them happening at once or in rapid succession could be a sign of a demonic presence. Obsession. As the name implies, at this stage the afflicted person has had a hard time functioning, becoming constantly preoccupied with thoughts of the demonic activity commandeering their life, and frequently with thoughts of suicide as well. Sleep becomes nearly impossible. And finally, possession. Contrary to popular belief, possession is not demons entering a person's body and taking over his or her soul. A person's free will is never removed, only severely compromised. In possession, a person is so physically, emotionally, mentally, and spiritually broken down by going through the other three stages that demonic spirits are able to seize occasional control over that person's action. And finally, we have portal hauntings. Portal hauntings are considered controversial in the world of paranormal research as there is little known and the idea is mostly theory or speculation. Portals are thought to be doorways to another world or dimension that entities can travel through, and it is speculated that portals are not limited to one location, region, or limited to sacred ground. Typically, places experience a wide array of different types of anomalies, such as glowing balls of light, odd creatures, strange shapes, or unexplained mists or fog, are suspected to have a portal in which these energies are travelling back and forth. In the women's ward of the Aradale Asylum, many ghost nurses have been seen, but none quite as well known as Nurse Kerry. This frontline worker worked in her life to keep the inmates in line, and in death appears to treat the living as if they are her new inmates. Her ghost has been seen by many and heard by even more. There have been many reports of hearing the disembodied click-clack of high heels throughout the empty ward, as well as the soft sounds of a woman's voice, something that Kerry was well known for in life. I speculate that this is likely a residual haunting, and in all accounts I have read about her, she has never intelligently interacted with the living. Further adding to what could very well be residual is the shrill sound of women screaming loudly. There have been many reports of shadow figures and infestation-style hauntings, where those who visit have reported that while in the electroshock room, they feel a hot buzzing in the temples, and if they are bold enough to venture into the areas that we once used for lobotomies, have claimed to suffer intense headaches. Other symptoms listed by visitors include nausea and the feeling of being watched. All of this could very well be paranormal, if not only a hypochondrial reaction to a dark history and the influence from the suggestion of ghosts. I ended up turning to Reddit for paranormal encounters that visitors have had. In this instance, I am going to say that I cannot confirm nor deny any paranormal experience that others claim to have, and we all know that the internet is filled with alleged experiences that they may or may not have really had. But for the sake of reiterating what others claim they have been through, I am going to believe their accounts. The first account I read explained that this happened before COVID, but that the Redditor grew up in the country where rough play fighting was a real thing for them. This means headlocks, light punching, just enough to leave a bruised but considered to be a fun pastime. So the fact they experienced something they considered dark really will highlight this is not a regular situation. The visit to the asylum wasn't a ghost hunting tour, but a visit to a historical tour at night. They explained that everything was pretty normal and nothing really happened besides a few random voices and weird vibes. Until they made it to the men's ward, of course, where the Redditor and their father both felt extremely uncomfortable on the top floor, where it is alleged that they did their therapies. While the guide talked, the Redditor claimed they looked back towards the door, where they saw a large black orb moving as if it was dancing. The orb then flew into their father, who started swaying back and forth, and allegedly, his pupils were going from big to small. The father seemed to return to normal once they left the ward and completed the tour. The drive home was reportedly tense, as they both talked about what happened and what parts of the tours freaked them out. The next few days after the tour, the father became uncharacteristically violent, both physically and verbally. The Redditor claims that after a time, it completely subsided and they turned completely back to normal. The assumption with this is it was a malicious possession, and in my research I found that this is relatively common in the former men's ward. It is reported quite often that those who visit the men's wing end up being bitten, scratched, and pushed. It all makes logical sense when you consider this would have been the area where the most dangerous patients were kept. So was this a previous dangerous inmate in spirit form? Or was this potentially a demonic presence? Another Redditor gave a detailed account of their visit to the asylum. They had joined a group of about 20 people for a tour, and made it perfectly clear that they had never been to any asylums before, but felt a strange sense of familiarity. They explained that they felt deep dread as they walked through the men's ward, and then felt extremely sick as they entered the women's ward. They claimed that they felt perfectly well before then, and couldn't quite understand why they felt the sudden need to throw up. The tour was littered with scary and unusual sounds once the tour entered the surgery. They felt as if someone was squeezing tight around their heart and needed to sit for a moment. After the tour guide was able to confirm that they were okay, they continued the tour, where the Redditor saw out the corner of their eye a figure. They explained the figure was a girl with long messy hair wearing a dress and straitjacket. They tried to get the attention of their friend by tapping them on the shoulder, but when they looked back to the figure, they had vanished, and they just assumed that they were seeing things. Allegedly, they then heard someone calling their name, and they slipped away from the group and followed the voice down the corridor. As she turned the corner, she saw the girl again. The Redditor goes on to explain that it looked like an older version of herself. The ghost girl continued to whisper the Redditor's name until she randomly dropped to the floor and started to contract in an unnatural way. Understandably, the Redditor became fearful and screamed. The tour group then ran to find them, where the ghost figure then vanished, and they just wanted to go home. Leaving early with their friend, they made it home just before midnight. They claimed they never spoke of it again, and instead buried it deep in their mind to move on with their lives. The part that kind of creeped me out with this is that the Redditor then went on to explain roughly 14 years later, they were going through some old photos of their relatives, and they saw the ghost girl. The picture was dated 1962, and a name was written in the bottom corner. They asked their mother about it, where she told them that it was her grandmother, and that the family doesn't talk about her because she was allegedly insane. The haunting sounds like it could have been an intelligent haunting, as the alleged spirit was able to communicate independently and directly to the living. That being said, however, most write-ups from Reddit and other places really don't have any paranormal experiences at Aradale, and that, more than anything, the tour guides are either dull, making thrilling information dry, and that they manage to also be creepy, but not in a way you could excuse for being in character. I assume the only way to figure out whether the Aradale Asylum is truly haunted is by going for a tour yourself. After all, experiences may vary, but do approach with caution. And on that note, that is all I have for you, my lovelies. As always, I will be posting pictures relevant to the episode on Facebook and Instagram at What You Should Know Australia. Follow me on Twitter for updates and polls at WhiskaPod. That is, as I said at the beginning of the episode, WYSKAPOD. As always, if you also want to send me an email, even if you want to send your own experiences, you can do so at whatyoushouldknowaustralia@gmail.com. But until next week, stay safe and stay hydrated. Bye!